Hello, folks, and welcome to episode 10 of Platform Enterprise, the show that platforms projects which protect the planet and empower people. That's a lot of P's. I'm your host, Rachel Donald, and I also write the Platform Enterprise newsletter, which is a weekly investigation into what keeps the world in crisis. In a nutshell, the newsletter is about the problems, and the podcast is about the solutions. Head over to www.platformenterprise.com to subscribe and get both the podcast and the investigation delivered to your inbox every week. On the show today is Heather Scott, a hydrologist and slow fashion advocate who is trying to save the world's waterways. What Heather revealed about the extent of the damage caused by the fashion industry was simply astonishing. When we talk about industry and climate change, we often focus on greenhouse gas emissions, but what about pollution? What about access to clean water? What about the fact that every day water is diverted away from communities in need in already water-stressed areas? As Heather explains, the water crisis is already urgent. On top of the science, Heather also details how to make your wardrobe sustainable, which of course means abandoning your favorite fast fashion brands. But trust me, when you hear what they're up to on the other side of the world, you'll be happy to leave them behind. I'm so excited to speak to you today, Heather, because you have such a fascinating perspective on kind of what's going on globally in fashion. Because not only are you this, kind of slow fashion advocate, and you're building this Instagram page, and you're trying to educate people, but you're also a scientist.
I'm actually a hydrologist. So my background is in water, modeling rivers, irrigation, water usage. So this ties in actually really nicely with the fashion industry because it's a huge, huge user of water. So it's good to be able to use my knowledge in a good way and try and educate people. For example, with t-shirts, about 2,700 litres of water to make one cotton t-shirt. Um,
2,700 liters of water.
Yeah, and about 10,000 litres for a pair of jeans. So when people are going, down to the high street on a Saturday and buy, go to Primark and see some jeans, for, I don't know, a tenner or whatever, they're not really realizing the background, what chemicals have gone into those. Because if you strip it right back and go to the cotton growing is grown in water scarcity areas around the world.
Mm.
So you've got huge lakes being drained just to irrigate cotton plants, and then all the chemicals being pumped onto that cotton.
Mm.
Because unfortunately, sustainably grown organic cotton is only about 1%,
Oh,
roughly
wow.
about that number. So it's mainly non-organic cotton, and that uses more water, more pesticides. You've got whole towns being wiped out because they've had to divert the water to irrigate the plants. So a lot of people are just not realizing this when they're buying their clothes. That they don't know what's going on behind the background. They don't know who's made their clothes. They don't know where the clothes have been made, how far they've traveled. So my starting point, obviously, with being a scientist is the water perspective. And I'm involved with the Better Cotton Initiative as well. And I'm going to be going to a conference. So that's going to be interesting, educating farmers on different irrigation techniques so they can hopefully try and reduce the water usage
Mm.
in the cotton and to get better yields. Because essentially, we still need to make the fashion industry tick over and generate money, but in a more sustainable way. So we need to make it more doable and more workable, really.
Because it's not as simple as just saying we're going to dramatically reduce our well, we're going to shut down bits of the fashion industry, because people tend to think, oh, fashion, it's like a dollar industry. It's just rich people that are kind of making all the money. It's like,
Mm,
well, actually, these huge industries in developed countries where like farmers depend on
mm.
that work. And if we were to just cut the head off the snake, there would be whole communities that would have suddenly no income.
Exactly. I mean, the people working in the fashion industry, they have families. They rely on this, so we can't just cut it off. But we need to be better in our approach, what materials we use, how they're grown, what chemicals we use, water usage. So we need to really redo the model of the fashion industry just now, because as it is, it's not sustainable. And I think I read somewhere, I think it was, we'd need three planets to sustain the amount of materials we're using if we carry on the current projection.
Oh
Um,
my
and I
God.
think this was by 2050. If we carried on, we'd need 3 planets worth of raw materials. So, and I think it was 63% increases predicted in buying clothes if we carry on as we are. So we need to put a stop to this. But it's been announced in 2030, a lot of companies, over 100 companies, have signed up to make a reduction of 30% or more reduction in really in everything, like sustainability wise, in raw materials, that sort of thing, water usage, emissions. So we as consumers need to hold those companies accountable. We need to make
Mm.
sure that they follow what they're saying. So I don't know, I'm a little hesitant to believe some of them with a lot of the greenwashing. So it's like, can I believe this or not? I'd like to believe that they're doing the right thing. But we'll see.
What I've kind of noticed with companies putting into place these policies or making these commitments to sustainability is that often these statements actually serve to undermine what they could be capable of achieving.
Mm,
So companies saying like, yeah, we're going to ensure that all our materials are recyclable,
mm,
from 2025 onwards. It's like, hang on.
mm,
Recyclable was what was needed 10 years ago. Now we need
yeah,
recycled materials in
yeah,
production. Like,
mm,
what are you doing? And also, it's still putting the onus on the consumer. Like
yeah,
it's actually on you to recycle. Like, no, 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 no,
mm,
no. It's on
mm,
you to stop polluting, to stop using fossil fuels, to stop using virgin materials.
yeah.
So it's creating this very false sense of progress when actually solutions have been available for decades, but these companies simply have not taken notice and put it into place.
Yeah, and with materials, at the minute there's only, it depends which source you read, but between 1% and 8% of materials are actually recycled just now. So, if you go into a shop, I'm not going to name any of them just now, but if you go in and you see, oh, made of recycled materials, what it's actually meaning is if it's recycled polyester, that it could be recycled bottles. But they're
Mm,
leading the consumer into believing that it's recycled material, when in
right,
fact there's not enough recycled material available to generate that collection. So it's very, very
right.
misleading. And the way it stands now, many clothes are made of, say, 50% polyester. They're made of a mixture and then 50% cotton or whatever. So when you're trying to recycle it, it's very hard to sort the fibers between, unless it's completely pure cotton, but even the labels are normally made of polyester.
Mm,
So they need to be cut off before it can be recycled. But there's great things coming out of Italy just now. They're doing some fantastic things with textile recycling and wool recycling, things like that. So that's really good. And I read something about this innovative company. They're actually, with orange skins, they're making a luxurious material, a bit like silk,
oh,
that's
really?
coming out. So there are advances all the time, and it's so wonderful to hear this. It's very positive. But a lot of the big companies, they need to reduce the amount they are selling the collections. I mean, they're bringing out up to 24 collections in 1 year, and
God,
there's only 4 seasons of the year,
yeah.
so it's quite madness. Nobody needs that volume of clothes.
Mm,
So they ultimately need to reduce the amount they are producing,
mm,
um, and start using better materials. And it's debatable, even recycled polyester with the microplastic
mm,
issue, it still produces the same amount of microfibers as virgin polyester. And as a scientist, it's one of the biggest threats just now. I am in particular getting very, very worried about this. Microplastics in water, they've been found in the umbilical cords of babies, and they're in drinking water, in
my
vegetables,
God.
in apples. Yeah, it's getting very, very worrying.
Could you
So
talk a little bit more about the Could you talk a little bit more about the effects of microplastics on our health? Because I think this is something that isn't
Mm,
particularly talked about. People tend to focus on BPA as the
yeah,
dangerous chemical
yeah,
as well, whereas actually it's kinda the whole package is the problem,
yeah.
right?
Well, we'll start back with the clothing. Um,
Mhm.
if you're wearing synthetic clothing like polyester, acrylic, nylon, a fleece, for example, every time you wash it, tiny, tiny fibers are coming off, called microfibers, and they're not being trapped in the washing machines. Current washing machine filters, they can't trap them, they're too tiny. So I actually bought a Guppy Bag. It's a German invention, and I put any synthetic clothing in there, and they capture the fibers, and I just
Mm,
put them in a little jar at the end. So I use that. Now there's work going on with conventional washing machines to try and develop better filters and everything. So that water is going to the sewage treatment works, being treated, but again, some of it is trapped in the filters, but again, it's released. So that's going directly into watercourses. And then sewage, it's sprayed onto the fields for agricultural purposes. So
mm,
when they dry the sewage, it gets sprayed onto the fields. So then it
mm,
gets leached back into the waterways that way. So it's like coming from several directions. And
mm.
then you have it from car tires. But clothing makes up about 35% of what's in the oceans.
Oh,
So
wow.
right, yeah. So it's not just single-use plastics, it's clothing as well. We have a huge role. A fleece, for example, is up to a million fibers released from just one wash. So it's yeah, it's unbelievable. So these little fibers are going into the food chain. So you're getting like plankton, krill, they're eating them. Then the bigger species are eating them, and they bioaccumulate and they don't disappear. And then, of course, if you're not vegan or vegetarian, you're eating that fish and it's entering the food chain that way. Now, those little particles in the ocean, they attract every awful like chemical going. So you've got like nasty chemicals that like stick to them. Now,
Okay.
they're accumulating in animals, so are those chemicals as well. So they're building up and building up. And the World Health Organization has acknowledged it is a huge problem. And they did a study, a preliminary one, but they need to do more because they recognize that it's on such a big scale that they need to do more to realize what the health impact is on humans. We know that it's not a good thing to ingest all this plastic. They reckon that we're ingesting about a credit card's worth a week in plastic.
You're
Now,
joking! A
yeah,
credit card worth a week.
yeah. So imagine that's going into your body, and I think we both know that's not a good thing. But they need to prove it. They need to do a study that links that with whether it's linked to cancers or whatever. I don't know. So I can't really comment on the actual health impacts because it's
Right.
unknown just now. But I know for certain that it's not a good thing. So part of my like clean up lifestyle, I switched from tea bags to loose tea, for example, to get rid of microplastics. I don't have any like toiletries that I have. I've got a little app that tells me if it contains any microplastics. I use the Guppy Bag for my clothing. So I'm trying to like clean up my act in general living about microplastics because it's something I feel really, really strongly about. So
And the app, is it an app that you can scan the barcode of something
um,
or is
yeah,
it
I think it's called Stop the Bead, something like that. Yeah, Beat the Microbead.
beat the
It's called.
microbeads?
Yeah, and you download it. And what you do, so say you've got like a facial toner or moisturizer, you just scan the ingredients. It shows you there's like a scanner on it, and it tells you. And because a lot of the ingredients they use like jargon, it can actually contain microplastics, but they're trying to hide it. So this deciphers everything for you. So it's really good. So it tells you whether there's microplastics in there. It's really good.
Oh
Um,
my god, that's amazing.
so you can go around in the shop and zap things and and find out if it's got microplastics in. So the EU, they made a ban on known ones in cosmetics, but there's a lot of like hidden ones. So it's worth doing that. So I use that a lot actually. Um,
God, that's bloody brilliant. 'Cause plastic is kind of at the center of, the climate change debate and certainly environmental
mm,
destruction. And it's definitely a topic that needs to be discussed and discussed and discussed and
Mm,
discussed, because there are huge benefits to
mm,
plastic in some cases, and then there are really, really terrible effects when,
mm.
it's something that we come into contact, or if it's in our food or these things.
Yeah.
And there's sort of this general sway. I think people are so panicked, and rightly so, about climate change. They
Mm,
want these very easy boxes of like, that's good and that's bad, and we're just going to split everything up. And there's this huge trend that everything that's natural is good, and it's like, well, it's
mm.
good until they start ripping down the rainforest and planting loads of fields of almonds to then
Yeah,
feed the supply of almond milk. So it's
yeah,
really, really, really complicated. So I
yeah.
think I'm very interested to hear what you say about things like polyester and microfiber, because that sounds very easily like, that's just not good. That's a definite thing where we can take and be like, yeah, that's not good. We need to replace that, or we need to change the habits that surround using clothes like that.
Mm.
Or, start buying second hand. I'm not sure if that directly links to what I was
Well,
saying, but
well, I guess, yeah, if you're buying secondhand, you're reducing the demand on fast fashion.
right.
Um, and I think the biggest worry is that fast fashion is so cheap that
Mm,
people are buying way beyond what they actually need, and they're just buying for the sake of buying because a lot of the time the prices are cheap, and they're not really looking into that it's crude oil which is making the polyester shirt or dress that they're wearing. They're not really making that connection, and then they're wearing
mhm,
it a few times, and then, oh, suddenly it gets a hole in, I'll just throw it in the bin, and
yeah.
it's going to landfill or being incinerated, and that is just essentially crude oil just being burnt, and we don't have enough of that to be sustainable. So we need to start looking at more natural materials, and we need to start making a switch from conventional cotton to more organic base because of the water and the chemical factor, which will also reduce CO2 emissions by switching to that, because you're not because obviously these chemicals take a lot of CO2 emissions to produce them in the first place. So
Right.
we need to make that switch and make it viable for the farmers to generate enough so their yields are big enough to generate to meet the demands so they can live, so we don't impact them. So I would say in general, move to more natural fibres. You've got linen, hemp, cotton, and I know it's a bit debatable, but even wool. I think wool is a really, really good fibre.
Why
It's
why is it debatable?
because it's very, very cruel, the trade. Yeah, where it's quite horrific. It's linked
Oh,
to,
really?
yeah, it's
I
very,
thought it
very
was just
where
shearing.
when shearing is on a commercial scale, it's actually quite brutal, and the sheep receive horrific injuries. It's Yeah, there's been a few. If you go on PETA, the animal
Mhm.
welfare, there's some awful cases. So a lot of if you're fast fashion, if they're using wool, for example, like say a lot of these products are produced in China, they don't have the same animal welfare standards as European countries, and it can be very, very brutal, the procedures. So it's like an ethical point of view.
Right.
But from a material point of view, it degrades, it's not polluting to the environment, it's a good material for keeping people warm. But you can get around this by buying secondhand wool or
Right.
recycled wool that's already in the system.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, if you go to a sustainable brand and they can ensure, they can guarantee the welfare of the animals, then I don't think there's any problem in using wool. For example, I know somebody that makes wool socks, and they have about 5 sheep, and they all have names, and they treat them. They're lovely.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
fantastic. It can be done, but I think when anything goes commercial, you start getting problems. It goes on to such a big scale. They're wanting to get as much wool as possible, and then the animals suffer. Yeah.
This is kind of, I think, one of the big dichotomies that we're facing with
Mm,
climate change, which
mm,
is, how do we ensure the survival of laborers around the world who have come to depend on global supply chains,
mm,
whilst addressing the fact that the minute something is commercialized, the minute that something is high demand, we simply do not have an equitable, just, fair and rich global culture to ensure that people won't do whatever they need to do to create that material. Because, like, you talk about wool, and I'm like, yeah, but here's the thing though. See if wool, tomorrow became the material to have, you would then see the Amazon getting, chopped
Yeah,
down to
yeah.
create fields to raise these sheep. You would see these practices of unethical shearing then be put into place. And it's like,
Yeah.
there's just when there's so much inequality in the world and so much poverty in certain places, like,
Mm.
it seems actually we can't really solve this problem. Like, go local, but yeah, then what about them? But also, if we use these laborers, we can't judge them for wanting to make a living and feed their family.
No, I mean the actual business model, the fashion business model it's not, it's so topsy turvy. It's just
Mhm.
ridiculous. It just does not work as it is. Here we are, a multi-million-dollar business, and we can't support the workers. Um,
Right.
I mean, the conditions, it's often forced labor, that they work long hours. It's 80% are women,
Mm.
exposed to all these toxic chemicals without protective material. They're breathing in from when they're working in the factories, all of the dust. They haven't got masks on.
God.
I mean, who are we to be demanding this just because of cheap clothing? It's ethically, it's not right for us to do this. Oh, we want
Yeah.
a shirt for €2 50, and we're demanding that somebody risk their life for this, and it's not fair.
Yeah.
So I think we need to, like, downscale. I think we need to support small businesses and not think so on a huge scale. I think if, like, the big players like Zara, Mango, H&M, if they just started to reduce their collections and focus on just cleaning up their act in general, by using better materials and bringing production closer to home to reduce the CO2 emissions.
Mm.
Obviously, we need the countries in the third world as well, but better initiatives. I think we need to, think about things view things completely differently to the way we've been viewing things. Uh,
Definitely.
mm,
And also, I mean, there seems to be the potential for creating economies elsewhere rather than just
yeah,
taking advantage of economies.
yeah,
If you increase, this is classic Henry Ford, and I don't think that we should exactly be referencing him for all that is good in the world. But if you increase, people's wages and give them time off so that they can then go and buy and develop their own economy on the ground.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, the idea isn't to have the first and third world forever. The idea is to raise everybody's standards of living.
Exactly. And I mean, we're denying young girls education because
Mm.
we're suppressing them. They're starting work at age 12 or whatever in these factories, and they're not allowed to progress with their education. And they just think that is their life, just working like this. And,
Mm.
it's not fair. So we're suppressing their way of life and education just because of cheap clothes. Um,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's sickening. And as a mother, I have two children, and I think it makes it even more aware when you have children yourself, because I want the best for my children, and I think every mother, regardless of where you are on the planet, you want the best for your children. And yeah, I think nobody wants to live in such poverty the way we are, sort of enforcing. So yeah,
Yeah.
changes
Absolutely.
to happen.
Yeah, definitely. And how did you get into all of this? So you are a
Yeah,
hydrologist.
I'm still a hydrologist. I've never left that world. Still a
Yeah.
hydrologist. But I wanted to link up. I got very interested in clothes a long, long time ago. It's actually my grandma. My grandma was the queen of secondhand, and back
Okay.
then in the 80s, they were called jumble sales.
Right.
So we would go along the Northumberland coastline, to like a church hall, filled with boxes and everything. My grandma would elbow people out of the way. She would be like digging around in these boxes. And I was 3 back then, and I thought it was wonderful that I was coming out with all these secondhand books and things like that. It was like, for next to nothing. It was fantastic. My grandma would give me some pocket money, and so I became like a little bit like almost addicted back then. It was like,
Mhm.
wow, this is fantastic. And then for years, me and my mum, we'd go around charity shops, but it was always like, oh, don't tell anybody. This has to be like a secret. It was like
Oh,
almost
really?
like it was like a dirty, like a little secret. Don't let anybody know where your clothes come from, kind of thing. But we really liked it. And then I started working for an organization where I was surrounded by really inspiring people. People were doing like car shares to work, they cycled to work, they were all vegan or vegetarian, and a lot of them were buying secondhand clothes. And suddenly, this dirty secret that I'd been carrying around for years
Mm.
wasn't so secretive anymore because everyone was doing it. And it was almost like quite hip to be part of this movement. And in this organization I used to work for, we had a lot of like information coming in about the environmental impacts and everything, and it was all just like filtering in. And then I moved over to Sweden. I met my Swedish husband and moved over here. And the second-hand market is, I've never experienced anything like it. It is fabulous over here.
Oh,
Um,
really?
but I guess that is reflecting that perhaps the Swedes have a problem with clothes. And, you can look at it that way. Like I bought a Michael Kors skirt before Christmas because I'm now not buying anything. I bought it before Christmas. I bought it for the equivalent of 50, well, it was 50 krona, which is about €5. Now,
Wow.
that to me signifies that if somebody's getting rid of a perfectly decent Michael Kors skirt and selling it for €5, there's something wrong, that they're,
Mm,
that they're viewing clothes as disposable. Um,
right.
so I picked up Burberry. I picked, like really branded names. This is what I go for. I try to up my game in the second hand. So
Mm.
I'm only buying like really good quality fitting, good quality materials. And it's incredible what you can find here in the second hand. It's structured a bit differently to the UK actually. The second hand, the actual shops are like in a warehouse. So you go in and you like go through a section so you can find furniture, you can like buy a whole, you know, you can buy a bed, you can buy a sofa, whatever. There's lamps in there, and it's all very, very typical Swedish, all very neatly organized. Everything, it's not like sometimes in the UK shops you go in and everything is like all over the place and
Yeah.
you don't know where to start, but everything is like very, very neatly organized. And sometimes even color coordinated on the rail, so you can go in and if you want a black top, you go to the black rail, or if it's a
Oh
pink
my
dress,
God.
so sometimes it can be like very, very structured. So, and it's not really on the high streets because Sweden doesn't do high streets as such, and they do more town centres. So it's very
Okay.
different to the UK. So people go with their cars to these out of town like warehouses, and it's like a whole. You go on like you spend a whole morning there. It's like a
Yeah.
little thing, and there's like a little. The Swedish word for coffee is fika. So you go and you have a fika with your friends, and it's like a social thing. You do this like this secondhand movement. And then there's the online secondhand in Sweden, which because of COVID, I haven't really been able to get out with the situation. So I've been buying more online, and it's fantastic what you can buy. So the Swedes really have their head screwed on for the environmental part of things over here. It's most people do buy secondhand, which I really like that side of things. They understand about the circular economy, and
Mm.
so I really like that about the Swedes.
I think Sweden is one of those Nordic countries that we all look to in reverence
Mm.
from down here in lowly Middle Europe. Like, oh, yes, gender equality, environmentalism, healthy economies. It's like the promised land, and I think we would all go if it weren't so cold.
Yeah, it is cold. It is cold.
But they're also extremely wealthy, these countries, and that's why,
Mhm.
you can pick up a Michael Kors skirt secondhand for €5.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of wealthy girls sitting in Stockholm that will buy something purely for a meeting or an event and then get rid of it. I mean, they're spending a lot of money on an outfit
Mm.
because they've got this disposable income, and for them it's nothing. Good news for me, fantastic news
Mm.
for me that I can go and, have a lovely designer wardrobe for next to nothing. But I think in attitude wise, that needs to be addressed. So I think it's very much like a 50-50 country here. The people that really embrace the secondhand market And then you've got the top earners that are very like frivolous with their clothes, and that needs to be addressed. And there's a huge problem, well, not problem, but with influencers over here. The glamorous, the lovely big walk-in wardrobes with all the clothes, and yeah, so it's there's that side of things.
That's
So
why it's so fantastic to see sustainable influencers having their moment in the spotlight. And I've been really amazed, and it's made me quite joyful and hopeful seeing people like you and other accounts like actually taking on this sort of civic responsibility to educate their peers and to educate other people and to try and inspire change and just sharing knowledge.
yeah.
I'm amazed by it.
Well, I actually love the education side of things. I've always been involved with master's students. Ever since I started my career, I've been in one way involved with students and been mentoring them and giving presentations. And I've been lecturing around in Sweden as well, giving lectures, and also in sustainability groups in the UK as well. I've been involved in that. I just really like the education side of things. I think getting back to what we were saying before, that we are suppressing the education of young girls that work in these factories. And education is the key. If we don't educate ourselves, we're never going to move forward. And it's very important to spread the awareness and educate people on microplastics and chemicals and sustainability in general. For a
Mm,
lot of people, especially in January, they'll be starting off on the journey. They've made that decision, oh, we're starting off, but a lot of people don't know where to start.
mm,
They want to make changes. They know that they need to make changes, but a lot of them are just starting their journey now. Whereas I've been doing it for a long time. So I try to create posts that people can relate to, that aren't too scientific and that are easy to understand. I
yeah,
try to put a lot of the jargon into understandable context for people,
yeah,
because I know that everybody's not scientific, so I need to try and make it work for everybody.
yeah,
Um, so
yeah.
so I hope I'm getting through to people. So,
I think so. I think influencers on Instagram, these sustainable influencers like yourself, I think you're having a really, really huge impact because you're making something, as you say, that seems quite confusing and unattainable. You're making it every day and giving people step by step. And what I think is particularly great is people tend to focus on like one thing. Like, you've got your fast fashion
mm,
influencers, like, okay, here's all the information you need. You've got your vegans that are giving you all this info. You got your intersectional environmentalists. You could
yeah,
follow like 10 influencers from different subgroups, and
yeah,
there you've got all of your information to
yeah,
radically overhaul your life
yeah,
in
yeah,
a way that just isn't kind of being given out by any organization or newspapers
mm.
because of the news cycle. So I think it's amazing. I really do.
Oh, thank you.
But I would like to know more of the science right
Yeah,
now because we can have a dialogue about it and break it down.
yeah.
What is happening to like our water systems in Europe because of fashion?
Well, the biggest threat in Europe is the microplastics. I would say a lot of the production, the textile production, has been moved to Asia or to
Mm,
China. So we're not really at that stage from chemical dyes. That's not really entering our waterways. That's not really a problem in Europe. That's more a problem. You've got textile production in India, Asia, Bangladesh, Cambodia, Vietnam, and especially in China as well. They actually say that there's a joke, you can tell next season's colour what's going to be in by looking at the colour of the water. So if it's
oh my God.
discharging pink, you know that pink's going to be in next year, for example. So it's really,
Is this like, sorry to interrupt, but is this like people's potential drinking water that's being polluted?
yeah, this water, it's used for drinking water, for washing clothes, general household usage. It's, yeah, up to 70% of rivers in China are so toxic that in some cases you can set fire to them, the water. And yeah, and a lot of it's illegal. They dig the pipes down so you have no idea which factory it's coming from. And
Oh,
the big corporations, a lot of the time, they sublease the factories. So, for example, you've got H&M, Zara. They will sublease the factory, so they say it's not their responsibility. So it ultimately boils down to, transparency with companies. They have to start being honest and say, yes, we are using this factory for textile production and textile dyeing, and this is our responsibility, and we are causing this environmental damage. We are causing
Mm.
huge amounts of fish kills. You've got birds, that eating the fish and dying. You've got people. There's a high concentration of liver cancers, of skin cancers, all related to this drinking water. I
Oh
mean,
my
it's horrific. People, they haven't got sense of smell. They oh, I mean, it's so horrific what's going on. It really, as a hydrologist, seeing water being abused in this way and what's being discharged in, it's really upsetting. And then
Yeah.
a lot of this water further downstream, it's been abstracted and used for irrigation purposes. So that's being used for rice irrigation, for other crops. And I think it was in cow's milk in India, they found cadmium, which had
What's that?
been traced back to the factories, which was released into the water, and then that water was used for feeding the cattle and for drinking water, and it was found in milk. It's entering the food chain in that sense,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's very worrying. But one of the biggest polluters is actually tanneries. So if you go to Bangladesh,
Mm.
um, so the tanneries for leather and suede, the chemicals that they are using, it's horrific, and it just discharging straight into watercourses. A lot of the people working in the industry, they have no protective clothing, so those chemicals are going straight onto the hands, it's being absorbed into the skin, and they don't live a very long life.
It's actually shortening their lives.
Yeah, yeah, it can cause miscarriages, birth defects, fertility. It's like a huge knock-on effect.
How
Uh,
is this shit legal?
this is, we are demanding all these handbags, leather goods, and then you've got the cheaper end of it, like Primark, that are selling leather shoes, leather handbags,
Mm.
for like €12, whatever. But it's all coming from our demand, for this is fueling this problem. But there's a great program if you watch River Blue that's really really good,
Okay.
about it's specifically on rivers, the impact of the fashion industry on rivers in Asia and India, and it's really really good, very moving actually. So I recommend anybody to watch that one. Um, so
River Blue.
yeah,
I'll put links to all of these things in
yeah.
the show notes so people have easy access to it. What is like the one big change that people could make, if there is one big change for somebody starting out that is listening to this and is extremely concerned about the effect of fast fashion? What is the one thing that would have the biggest change that they could do?
Well, there's what you call a hierarchy. So start with your own wardrobe. Start looking at your clothes and start to love your clothes. Start to look at them in a different way. There's lots of apps. For example, I've got one that can you put together pieces in your wardrobe, and they put together different combinations of clothes you already own in ways that you'd never think of. So it's like you've got a stylist on hand. So it's fantastic.
Oh my
Um,
god.
so if
Amazing.
you've got like a maxi skirt or whatever, it'll pair it up with a different top, and it'll provide ideas for you.
Mm.
So I use that for ideas and inspiration. It's really good. It's called Closet. I think there's another one, My Wardrobe or something, but Closet. I use Closet.
Okay.
So my first advice would be, start with what you already own. Build up like what I call a core wardrobe. So you have like jeans, t-shirts, the basic essentials. So you have the foundation block, and try and avoid like any trendy stuff, because that is essentially just adding to the mound of clothes that are going to landfill. Try and just keep to, I would say, like a neutral basic wardrobe as like a staple, and then if you feel that you need something different, why don't you swap or borrow with a friend? I've just actually won a big global competition on creating clothes swaps around the world. Which
Amazing.
I was like, oh, yeah, yeah, I really got into that. Obviously with COVID, it was like not so easy. But you can swap with your best friend, you can swap with your mum, you can set up a swapping party in your own home. If you get advanced, you can set up a swap in a hotel and invite more people. So it's up to you, what level you do it on. But swapping is essentially a really good way of getting something new in your wardrobe without hurting the environment, because it's
Right.
keeping clothes in circulation. It's not involving any purchasing of new clothes, not fueling the demand. So that's really good. And then you can also rent things. The rental market it's growing all the time. You've got some fantastic, you can even rent children's clothes if you want.
Mm.
There's some great, apps out there and everything. You can There's a one, it's called Hack Your Closet, where you receive clothes in a box every month, like a different set of clothes, and then at the end of the month you send them back again. So yeah, so I think it's designed for people that live in like small Stockholm flats that don't have a big wardrobe, but they need to keep looking nice all the time and like fresh clothes. So then the next stage, if you are going to buy, I'd say the last stage is buying, and look at the sustainable brands. Yes, they tend to be more expensive, but they are expensive for a reason, because they pay a decent wage to their workers. They don't use the chemicals. A lot of them are organic. So you have to look at, weigh up, is fast fashion worth it because I might be causing somebody a premature death, or
Yeah.
like, do I turn to a sustainable brand? So, and of course, I missed out in the hierarchy secondhand as well. Stupid me, I missed out
That's
second.
all right.
So yeah, so look at your own wardrobe first, swap or borrow, and then buy second hand. You can rent, and then the last thing you should do is buy. So that would be my advice for anybody starting out. Look at your buying needs as like a hierarchy, and try and stick to that. And that's what I do. And then
Mm.
you can always ask yourself questions when you're buying. Is it essential? Leave it a week. Do I still want it after a week? How many items in my wardrobe will that item go with? You know,
Mm.
if it just goes with one item, you're more likely to get rid of it. But if
Yeah.
it goes with 10 items in your wardrobe, you're more likely to keep it. So yeah, so look, ask yourself some questions, really important questions.
Mm.
And yeah, I think that is a good approach to, if anybody's starting out this year to trying to be sustainable. Um,
But really, like the number one thing is just stop buying new
Stop,
clothes.
yeah, stop buying new clothes. Yeah, just learn to love your clothes, learn to repair them. I mean, so many times I have seen on secondhand websites that somebody's donated something literally because a button has come off and they haven't bothered to sew it back on.
Yeah.
Um, so where this new generation, where we've got this attitude, this disposable attitude. I don't know if you've ever been to Beamish
Mm.
Museum. It's in Newcastle, and it's set in wartime Britain, and everything was rationed, everything was repaired, there was no plastic, everything was in metal tins. I mean, it is ultimate sustainability, guideline to go by. And
Yeah.
clothes were passed down, they were looked after, they were worn until they literally fell off their backs. And I think we need to go back. We need to go back to that approach where, it's acceptable to give secondhand gifts, it's acceptable to pass clothes down. Uh,
Mm.
we need to learn how to repair. I have no skills on a sewing machine. We never did that in school. We were, well, my school, we were very focused on science, on English, on maths, but no practical skills, a sewing machine. So I think that needs to change. Schools need to get back to basics, teach children how to look after their clothes, learn the importance of it. So yeah, there's a change on every level that we need to implement.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course, there's no one solution, but I think it's really good to identify like what kind of long-term changes need to happen and then what you can do right now. Because obviously not everybody is going to stop buying new clothes, which means like the economy will still survive as we're trying to figure out a solution. But if there
Yeah.
is a big enough minority that
Mm.
kind of take responsibility for some changes, then it should have an ongoing effect.
Yeah. Yeah.
But one thing that I would love to get some knowledge from you on, if you have it, because it's quite a complicated topic, but you mentioned sustainable brands.
Yeah.
Now, like how do we spot greenwashing? Because there are many quote unquote sustainable
Yeah.
brands that simply are not.
Yeah, there's been a few companies that have approached me on Instagram, for example, do you want to be a brand ambassador? And when you take a look at the company, they have no information on where the product was made, how it was
Right.
made. If you were to ask them about, what chemicals were used, they wouldn't be able to tell you. Now, a good way to spot a good sustainable company is they're very, very open. They are very transparent. A good one is EcoAlf, for example. They are very, very good. They use a lot of the guy who founded it. He's very passionate about waste in the ocean. So he reuses a lot of fishing nets and he makes
Mm,
coats and hoodies and trainers all from recycled fishing nets. And he tells you if you go onto the section about what his, where his where the garments are made, the factories, everything is open. But with greenwashing, a lot of these companies they use like general statements, and they'll say made of recycled polyester, but they'll not tell you it could be as little as 1% recycled
right.
polyester going into that garment, or they could what they could be meaning is, oh, it's made from bottles which we got cheap, or in some cases bottles are actually made to be recycled into a dress, which is madness. um,
Oh, fuck off. Sorry,
yeah.
excuse my French.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah, I can't remember the source where I read that, but I was shocked. I was like, this can't be true. This literally can't be true. So you've got companies that are jumping on that bandwagon, that they want to be seen as green and everything. So yeah, so that was really, really shocking.
That actually reminds me of Apple's whole recycled aluminium thing.
Yeah.
It's not post-consumer, it's post-industrial. So pretty much it's their manufacturer, whenever any aluminium falls off
Yeah.
the assembly line, essentially, that's collected and then made into Apple product. And that is just not the same thing as post-consumer scrap.
No, it's not. So,
It must be so frustrating,
oh,
especially with somebody who's so sort of well versed in this.
yeah, I mean, it's really, really frustrating. I mean, there's enough clothing like circulating around and enough going to landfill, that can be recycled. I mean, they are getting better at like different techniques for sorting out fibers and everything. And I'm sure, it will happen. Advances are being made all the time in technology. But I think we just need to make it like industrial scale, so it's all recycled. And then that would stop the virgin polyester being made in the first place, because my personal opinion is we don't need any more polyester entering the system. We've got enough circulating around. We just do not need any more. So it
Yeah.
would be ideal to stop that and just use what we have, become circular. But we need a huge shift in attitudes. And I mean, even here in Sweden, which is renowned for this, I went down to my local recycling station. I said, where do we recycle textiles? It doesn't exist. So
Oh, really?
this is Sweden. So they said, oh, try H&M. So I went into H&M. They had like a little box. So I peeked inside, and there was like maybe one item donated, and I was like, okay. So H&M is making a collection made of recycled polyester, and I was like, this is a bit of greenwashing, because
Mm,
who where are these clothes being recycled? I know that there is a facility in Sweden to do it, but I don't know on what scale that is being recycled. So yeah, so I think it's very difficult with the whole greenwashing thing. Who's telling the truth, who's not.
mm,
But I think read between the lines, look very carefully. Don't be afraid to ask them. They can't answer your questions, then be suspicious of them. But everything should be on their website, their sustainability, everything should be on there. So you should be able to get answers from there. For example, Polar Impera is a Swedish children's brand, and they're very open about, they use fleeces from recycled bottles and things like that. So they're very open about their sources.
mm.
And they try and make clothing to last 3 generations.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
mm, yeah, even like by making the cuffs on clothes, so
Mm.
they make them so they can extend the life, so they last longer, and they're made of like really good quality cotton. Because children are like, they roll on the ground, they get holes in the knees and everything. I
Yeah,
I've been
good.
there. So yeah, and they make them so they're pretty tough clothing and designed to last longer. So it's essentially the buy less, buy better philosophy.
Yes.
And then those clothes are passed on. And they make quite neutral clothing as well. So my daughter actually wears a lot of my son's clothes
Mm,
because it's like stripy clothes and it's quite neutral to be passed down.
right.
And so yeah, so that's all part of the big circle of being sustainable, circular
Right.
growth. Yeah.
Are there any brands that you could advise people to just stay away from?
Oh, you mean like greenwashing brands or?
Or even just, not even the ones that are bothering to greenwash, like the ones there is just, we know that they're not doing enough, that their practices are bad, that you would just advise to stay away from.
Well, I think the big top players, like H&M, Zara, Mango, like C&A, all those, like Primark. Primark is like really, really
Hmm.
bad. And yeah, because they fail to answer a lot of questions. H&M, they say, yeah, we're going to be on track by 2030 and reduce this, but they're still bringing out all these collections made of polyester, and they brought out, it was a dress, it was for €20 and it was made of recycled polyester. So my first question was, how can a dress be made for €20 from the other side of the world? So, what are those garment workers earning in the first place? You've got to factor in the shipping from China, wherever it was produced, back over to Europe and then shipped out to, all corners of the world. How can they sell it for just €20? So that was like my first question. And it was only one collection that they produced made of this. So I had like a few issues with that. But I think probably H&M is one of the better ones out of them all that's actually doing something. The others, I think because they've signed up to these sustainability targets, they have to be seen to be doing something. And I think maybe pushing one collection out here and there to try and convince the public. But I think they could personally do a lot more. But
Definitely.
we'll
I
see.
think
We'll see what they do.
we will see. I think in so many industries that solutions have been available for a very long time. What could be done is actually quite monumental,
Mm,
and companies are just not willing to sacrifice profits, not willing to implement changes, and giving off a very false impression that they're doing everything they can, and it's total nonsense.
yeah, yeah.
Heather, this has been awesome. I'm so pleased that I got a hold of you and that you said yes to this interview. It's been really, really great. Do you have somebody to finish up? Do you have somebody that you would like to platform?
It's a company, Conscious Turtle, and they've set up like an eco store. And what they do, they put little on their Instagram posts about sustainability in general. And I really like them because I think they appeal to a wide audience and they're educational. And I just really like their approach. They cover all aspects of sustainability, and I just really like them. And I think what they're doing is really good. They've just launched, and yeah, I think any small business, because we need to move away from the big
Yeah.
businesses and support these small businesses. And yeah, so I'd like to give them a little shout out and I'll give them my support.
Okay.
So that's my
Fantastic.
a little shout out.
Fantastic. And I will see if I can maybe get one of the founders on the show to talk about their company mission. It'd be really good to have some
Yeah,
small
yeah,
businesses
that
on. Yeah, absolutely.
would be great.
Oh, Heather, thank you so much. This was
Oh, you're
wonderful.
welcome. You're welcome.
Thank
It's
you.
great chatting to you.
Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Hi, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed that. You can find the link to Heather's Instagram page in the show notes, where she posts a lot of educational information. I really enjoy following it. And you can also listen to every episode of Platform Enterprise and read all of the articles at www.platformenterprise.com. If you are a subscriber, if you're considering it and you really enjoy the content, please consider getting a paid subscription because it enables me to keep platforming amazing people and the work that they're doing, which is the best job ever, frankly. All right, have a good week and we'll see you next time. Thank you.